Good evening, and I'll try this one more time. Thanks for letting me know. The last time around, I didn't have very good volume. I'm not exactly sure what happened. But at the same time, I also received company. My daughter Laurel just walked in to pick up her jacket, and so I stopped things and erased it and decided to start over. So just a note, we have a new Minister of Agriculture in Manitoba. His name is Blaine Peterson. He called me just a couple of hours ago and asked me whether I wanted to do an interview. And I said absolutely yes. So later on I'll process that interview and you'll be able to hear what the new Minister of Agriculture in Manitoba has to say about some of the things that he's looking after, some of the questions I asked him, and so that's a good thing. Then another thing that happened, I got off the phone with Max Armstrong. Max is the host of the This Week in Agribusiness for many, many, many years with Orion Samuelson. But it looks like Orion, going to be 86 years old, is dealing with some significant back pain. May not be back on the set in Chicago like he has been. In fact, the last time I talked to them, when they interviewed me, it was both Orion and Max, and I was so happy to see both of them. They've been friends from 1978 to 1980, about in that era, where I became a member of the National Association of Farm Broadcasters of America, and they took me under their wing, so to speak, and have been longtime friends ever since. So I will be on their show, not this coming weekend, because we need to pre-record that next week, Thursday. And I just checked the date. That's my birthday, or at least it's Halloween. Anyway, so that'll be a good thing. We're going to talk about the Canadian election. We're also going to talk about crops, and then thirdly, we'll talk about the proposed legislation in the Alberta legislature today. Those people that on the long weekend in September entered the Jumbo River Hutterite colony and without asking, they've been charged with one count of break and enter to do mischief. Good for them. And the new legislation is proposing $25,000 a fine for anybody that trespasses on a farm. And in this case, the biosecurity, walking into a turkey barn, absolutely silly. They're there to say they stand up for animal activism. It was getting before Thanksgiving, so of course they didn't want all these turkeys to die, and yet they walk in there without any thought of what it would do to the health of those birds. But that's going to change, at least in Alberta. It would be nice to see the same thing happen across Canada, and in particular here in Manitoba. I guess I should have asked Blaine Peterson about that issue, but I didn't. It's good to see William Hepner watching. Pico Friesen, Dwayne Thiessen is watching as well. It's great to see you people there, and yes, there are things that are going on here in agriculture. As I mentioned before, we have a new Minister of Ag. Ralph Eichler, the former Ag Minister, has gone over to a new portfolio, and I don't have it in front of me, but we'll, of course, find that out soon enough. It was interesting. I was watching the replay of the inauguration of the new cabinet ministers and the swearing in of all of them just taking place in Brandon this morning on YouTube. And it didn't take long, and I got a text message from Blaine saying if I was interested in interviewing him. That's great. That's establishing contact the way contact must be established. And he gave me his cell number, and I will have access to that number, and I can leave him messages and call him whenever I think there's an issue that I feel my readers and my viewers and my listeners need to hear. So the crop, we've got, kind of +4 during the day, I think was the high. Looking at some frost for tonight. It's not good at all for the potato farmers, but for the 4,500 or 400,000 acres of corn, it's a good thing. For the simple reason, first of all, it wants to dry it down, and secondly, we need to have people being able to drive on those wet fields. We don't need those ruts that you can see when people are going on there with rubber tractor tires instead of tracks, and not everybody wants to buy tracks for one wet year. So it's an interesting time. I also had a chance to visit with Jason Clausen. Jason, the owner and president of Wentworth Ag, just west of Winkler. I met him at a meat store, Spence Meats Shop here in Winkler yesterday, and I asked him a few questions. I know he's in the dryer business, and he says it's pretty busy. And so I'm going to have that interview sometime in the near future as well, talking about what he sees as far as the dryer business this fall and what he sees going into winter and next spring. As he mentioned, hoping that some of those trade issues, especially the canola one, could get resolved before farmers go out into the fields next spring. But you know what, Prime Minister Trudeau, I hope that you finished twiddling your thumb, and but it doesn't look like a picture of a photographer taking a picture of the Prime Minister sitting at his desk and signing his own autograph. What a farce we have in Ottawa right now. Yes, I say exactly that. And then we see in Alberta, and Saskatchewan, and of course here in Manitoba, Brian Pallister says, don't waste my time with the talk of separatism. Well, I don't think it's so much about separatism, but it's about starting to stand up to the Prime Minister, who really doesn't care about one iota about Western Canada, and standing up for what our people, so many times, Saskatchewan and Alberta have been sending money to Ottawa. Guess what? Over $1 billion of that comes back as a transfer payment because we are a have-not province here in Manitoba, and yet we stand up and say, "Oh yeah, we're gonna work with Trudeau," and that's good. We need to work with Ottawa, but at the same time, if they're not willing to work with us, then we got to do something. It's like Jim Pallister, the brother to the Premier, tweeted, it's a bit like a marriage relationship. If there's abuse, then there comes a point where you need to stop the abuse or get out of the relationship. Well, that's just some opinion that's out there, but when Jim Pallister says something, I've appreciated getting to know Jim over the years. Way back when, 1980, when we started to work to get the Canadian Wheat Board's monopoly removed, you know what? It took some doing. And if you ever want a situation where you think it's not going to happen, don't give up. I mean, I didn't know for sure whether we would ever see that monopoly gone in my lifetime. But in 2012, thanks to Stephen Harper and Jerry Ritz and the rest of the people, we were able to remove the monopoly. And yes, there are still those people that say, oh, it's so tough out here. The Wheat Board was everything to everybody. It wasn't. The only thing the Wheat Board was really good for was the 650 people that it employed in the big office in Winnipeg. Well, don't need to rehash the old stuff. I guess one other thing, Ralph Goodale, who played havoc with those farmers who opposed the Canadian Wheat Board back in the 90s. He got beat soundly, finally, in Regina. There isn't an NDP or a Liberal as far as a federal MP is concerned in Saskatchewan. 1 out of 33 seats in Alberta is not Conservative. So that's pretty well a wash. Well, it's a beautiful day today, sitting inside looking out. A little nippy once you got outside, but there's so much going on out there. We need to keep our faith. We need to stand up for what it matters. We need to stand up for what is right. Friends, that's it for me this time around. Somewhere, sometime, I'll see you again. And that is Seamans Says.